troops braving police violence in what was a symbolic victory for Mr. Navalny. He has been in prison since mid-January after returning to Russia from Germany, where he spent 5 months recovering from nerve agent poisoning, something which he blames on the Russian president. Well, I'm joined now by Maria Pevchik from the Anti-Corruption Investigative Unit, the team behind the investigation. Maria, thank you so much for joining us. I'll get to the investigation in a moment, but first of all, over the weekend we saw mass protests across Russia. And we really have seen protests in the past, but can you tell me what makes these different?
Well, I mean, the scale of it was definitely different. We haven't seen anything like that really ever, probably, because we're talking about the so-called unauthorized and sanctioned protests. So this.
In August 2020, on the order of Vladimir Putin, Navalny was poisoned with Novichok, a chemical warfare agent. He survived, came back to Russia, and was arrested right at the airport. On August 18, 2020, the court unlawfully arrested Alexei Navalny and sent him to prison. For many years, Navalny's been fighting for our rights. Now it's time to fight for him. January 23rd, 1400 hours. Central streets of your cities. Take to the streets. Don't stand aside.
Hi, it's Navalny. We came up with this investigation when I was in intensive care, but we immediately agreed that we would release it when I returned home to Russia, to Moscow, because we do not want the main character of this film to think that we are afraid of him, and that I will tell about his worst secret while abroad.
Thanks. See you later.
One of these viewers is the most devoted admirer of our work, on whose orders I was poisoned, is Vladimir Putin. He's definitely watching us now, and his heart is filling with nostalgia. This is not only an investigation, but also, in a sense, a psychological portrait. I really want to understand how an ordinary Soviet officer turned into a madman who is obsessed with money and luxury and literally ready to destroy the country and kill for the sake of his chests of gold. That's why this is a very symbolic place to start our film. I'm in Dresden, and this inconspicuous panel building is where first corruption schemes were drawn by those who would later arrange the biggest robbery in the history of Russia. They will simply steal all the national wealth. Their leader, 33-year-old Volodya Putin, the future richest man in the world, lived here. In those days, everything was simple, and the level of his atrocities roughly correspond to the level of this building. Vladimir Vladimirovich was occupied with how, using his official position, to get hold of a good imported radio tape recorder. But in principle, neither his methods nor his circle of proxies have changed. It's just that before they were interested in radio tape recorders, and now in huge state enterprises. They sat at ceremonial events and read speeches. It's just that in those days they praised grandfather Lenin and swore allegiance to the ideals of communism. Today we will see what is considered impossible to see up close. We will go where no one is allowed. We will pay Putin a visit and see with our own eyes that this man, in his craving for luxury and wealth, has gone completely mad. We will find out how and with whose money this luxury is financed, and how, over the past 15 years, the biggest bribe in history is being given, and the most expensive palace in the world is being built. Putin, a petty KGB officer who now masquerades as a great spy, came to Dresden in 1985. He wants us to think of him as a cool infiltrator, but in fact, he was an ordinary employee, not even of a secret residency, but of the official representative office of the KGB in East Germany, a friend of the Soviet Union. Today's court propagandists love to romanticize that period of Putin's life, claiming that he infiltrated the enemy's lair. In fact, this building was a warm place where a bunch of idlers like Putin sat at hearty meetings and awarded each other with mementos, just like they do now. November 21st, 1987, suited up Putin, believe it or not, at the Brothers in Arms ball. The event is dedicated to the friendship between the KGB and Stasi, the Great October Revolution, and the inevitable victory that socialism still overlooked. On this day, Putin was presented with a golden badge. It's a symbol of friendship between Germany and the Soviet Union.
Friendship with the Soviet Union became the need of the heart of every citizen of the GDR.
Now this valuable can be purchased by euros. Throughout the evening, Putin and his colleagues wear long sleeves, drank Soviet cognac, walked slides, and trembled with pride and loyalty to ideas of Marxism and Leninism. In less than 2 years, not a trace of all this will remain. The Berlin Wall will be destroyed. East Germany, along with the Stasi and KGB officers, will cease to exist. The system built on lies and oppression collapsed, but left behind one very important legacy, its archives. Alas, despite his dreams and expectations, Putin failed to build a career or get rich in Dresden. But on the other hand, he met with the people who would later become his main wallets. I've now put on white gloves and am aided by David Schraubman, head of Corrective. Here is Putin's case file. Well, let's study it.
You have time for a funny story?
Let's discuss an insert. You've already seen this photo. Vladimir Putin receives a golden badge. But not everyone noticed this gentleman. And this is none other than Sergei Viktorovich Chemezov, now the head of the Rostec Corporation. He served alongside Putin. So in this photo, we see two of the richest people in Russia. Well, Putin is probably the richest man in the world, and Chemezov is definitely one of the 5 richest people in our country. After 30 years, he is still around, but already as a billionaire civil servant. It's peculiar how carefully the Germans recorded everything. Typical Germans. Here's the program of the evening, and it is written that at 6 p.m., a special toast will be pronounced in honor of representatives of the host country, and that everyone will be given a glass of Soviet cognac. Further on, they make all sorts of solemn speeches, praise Comrade Lenin, praise socialism, give each other souvenirs, and according to the program, no later than 5:45, Vladimir Vladimirovich begins to dance, because at 5:45, the dances start. We have 2 booklets with photographs. This one has been shown repeatedly on TV. You've seen it many times. This is a Stasi ID with the name Vladimir Putin on it. There's a similar ID with a picture of a very nice person on it. This is Nikolai Petrovich Tokarev, the man at the head of Transneft. He, unlike Chemezov, never confirmed his work in the KGB, and in his official biography, there's a 20-year gap and work in the mining industry. Well, we have filled this gap. The number of the IDs differed by 1 digit. Here's another document, a Stasi phone book. It has a section, Comrades/Friends. Let's study it. Look, Major Tokarev and Major Chemezov have the same phone numbers. That is, they literally sat in the same office, and the desks were obviously next to each other. It was here in Dresden that Putin defined his main life principles, which would later become the basis of the Russian state. 1. Always say one thing and do another. Lying and hypocrisy are the most effective methods of work. Number 2, corruption is the foundation of trust. Your main friends are those who have been stealing and cheating with you for many years. Number 3, and the most important thing, there is never too much money.
St. Petersburg.
Early 90s Leningrad. Think for yourselves how tough a spy Putin was in Dresden if, upon returning to Leningrad from the assignment, he was sent to an unpromising job at Leningrad University. His old university friend Nikolai Irgorov also worked there. This is one of the little-known but key and most trusted people of Putin. In the 70s, Irgorov and Putin sat at the same desk and were friends. Along with him, 2 other Putin's classmates and closest friends at that time, Ilgam Ragimov and Viktor Kamarin, were not deprived of his attention either. Back then, they were united by their passion for martial arts. Let's remember them. In '91, the same Yegorov did Putin a favor that changed the life of the future president forever. he recommended Putin to work in the mayor's office of St. Petersburg in the Committee of External Relations. It is terribly entertaining to recall these pages of Putin's biography now. After all, he loves to remember how he experienced the collapse of the USSR.
The collapse of the Soviet Union was the biggest geopolitical catastrophe of the century.
He condemns the 90s, Yeltsinism, Democrats, and calls everyone around him foreign agents.
I won't tell you the people that were in charge in the 90s were a gang, but I will note that since then, our social sector and the defense industry has completely collapsed. We've lost the defense industry, we've practically destroyed the military, led the country to a civil war, to the bloodbath in the Caucasus.
Putin took off like greased lightning to work for one of the main Democrats of those times, the radical critic of the USSR, Anatoly Sobchak. And so it happened. A man who has dreamed of money all his life has finally got a grasp on this money. He found himself in a position where there is something to steal, where bribes are given. And here our Vladimir Vladimirovich really showed himself. The most famous and well-researched topic are the export licenses. Putin was engaged in issuing such licenses to companies that were allowed to sell oil products, timber, aluminum, copper, cotton, and raw materials abroad in exchange for food. Literally, oil in exchange for sugar and potatoes, timber in exchange for baby food.
Anatoly Alexandrovich just told me the 2,500 tons of sugar have just been purchased from the green and prepared for shipment to St. Petersburg.
So are we coming through now?
Well, let's not cross that bridge till we come to it.
Putin personally distributed licenses, and as it turned out later, he gave them to shell companies, including those associated with himself and his friends. The scheme was elementary. The raw materials went abroad, the bogus companies received the money for it, and the products never arrived.
This is our motherland, the most valuable thing we have.
One of the main places of income for Putin was the seaport. The place is legendary. It's one of the symbols of the bandit Petersburg. In the early 90s, this strategic facility turned into a criminalized territory where people got shot, killed, and were constantly dividing something. The port was controlled by one of the most famous crime bosses of that time, Witcher3, nicknamed Bandits be bandits, but all sorts of papers and permits still need to be signed and executed. This is what Putin, the official, was doing. Formally, he represented the interests of the states, but in fact, he was helping the bandits working in the port. He served their interests and was a helpful assistant in the mayor's office, who could help real tough guys solve their problems. Here's an example, the oil terminal in the port. Trevor was the chairman of the board of directors. Another share was controlled by the head of the Tambov gang, Gennady Petrov. And Putin, as said by none other than the head of Gazprom Neft, Alexander Dyukov, who was then the general director of the terminal, provided the project with serious help and support. It is very easy to see who else Putin provided serious support. Oil products were supplied abroad through the terminal by Gennady Timchenko, the future billionaire, the main trader of Russian oil, and one of the most famous Putin friends.
Their surnames are kind of a strange, Timchenko, typical Ruskies. I think I should keep my distance from them.
It was then that the story of his super profitable business, oil trading company Gunvor, began. When Putin became president, 4 out of 5 of our country's major oil companies did not sell their oil abroad directly, but through the Swiss intermediary, Gunvor. Thus, Timchenko, without doing anything, earned incredible money. Throughout the entire existence of Gunvor, it was believed that Putin had a secret share there. Even the U.S. Treasury officially claimed that Putin had access to Gunvor's money. But it was not clear to whom this share was registered for many years. And then it was found out. All this time, there was a secret shareholder in Gunvor, Pyotr Kolbin. No one understood where this amazing shareholder came from. He could have millions of dollars to invest in Gunvor. Until 2016, when journalists discovered that Pyotr Kolbin was Putin's childhood crony. They grew up in the same village, went to discos together, and had a friendship as families. And it became obvious that Kolbin was the holder of Putin's share all this time. You're probably thinking now, wait, does this mean that Putin was directly paid bribes? In envelopes? Yes! One of the participants of the Petersburg crime scene in the 90s, Maxim Friesen, told in an interview how the scheme of interaction with the mayor's office worked. If it was necessary to formalize something, they needed to come to the Foreign Relations Committee, listen to a ceremonial speech about the importance of economic partnership, and then Putin simply wrote on a piece of paper the required amount of kickback, a small one, $10,000 or $20,000, and as that money needed to be registered with, that is, brought to, his assistant Alex Miller. Now, Alex Miller needs no introduction. For almost 20 years, he's been heading our national treasure, Gazprom. He's clearly better at registering bribes than running a state-owned company. In 2008, Miller boasted that in 7 to 8 years, Gazprom will become the most valuable company in the world with a capitalization of $1 trillion. At that moment,
such is life sometimes. Still, thank you. The amount we agreed. Here.
fresh. You know it wasn't too long ago. They need to quarantine. Died on the day of St. Sullivan's remembrance. Prices started right around then. Gold. Can't be grave robbers. Not with their salt would have this. Smashed, as if someone threw it against the wall. No sign of monsters or grave robbers. Bit of a mess, that's all. Maybe this isn't the spot after all. Strange. Noises clearly coming from that tomb. Impossible. Something's not right. Need to hide, see how things play out.
You'd rather lie about all day, flipping those cards like some dwarf. Disgusting. Indeed. Far better to stand at the door of Nebula's temple, mumbling prayers from dawn till dusk. Great. I prayed for you, that you would cast off the yoke of gambling. Fine job you did of it. Seems the gods had also heard enough of your cackling. And you? Why are you here? This is a private conversation.
What's this argument about, anyway?
Sod off. Not your concern.
Could help you resolve it.
I know not your name, but you must help me. I refuse to spend eternity at the side of this heathen. Remove him from my crypt at once.
Slow down. What's the problem?
This is my crypt, and this saintly shrew harangues me even in death. An eternity of nagging for misery. I was blind and a fool to marry him. He's a slave to the cards, prepared to wager his own child on a round of Gwent. Once, damn it, and as a jest. How many times must I explain? And who sank our fortune into some silly statue of Lebioda? Piety. That was my course. The prophet immortalized would have transformed this land of blasphemy and betting.
Each day.
How was I to know it was all a fraud? Because I warned you some 500 times.
Quiet. Shut up, both of you.
Have some patience.
Who does the crypt belong to, rightfully?
Must you ask? It's mine. My family. The Decoratans. Are you illiterate? True. That my dowry served to repurchase it from those you owed.
Look, if there's to be peace and quiet here, one of you's gotta go. Need to move one of you out.
Yes. Take him. Please. Do so. And I shall tell you where I hid his lucky Gwent cards. What? I knew it was you. And now you would evict me from from my crypt, then pay for the deed with my cards. Blast it all! Had I those very cards at the tournament in Belhaven, I'd still be alive. It's your fault, you pox! Attacked me to death.
They murdered you for your debts. I had nothing to do with it.
Can't I heed this good book-thumping wench? Mind, I know where she hid those cards. I'll tell you myself as soon as you've removed them.
Need to think about it. Alright, gotta move one of them out.
Thus spoke the prophet Lapiota. Thou shalt not play the queen.
After which he promptly added, for you shall have none left for me.
Heretic, shut your mouth. I shall speak to you no more.
No, it is I who shall speak to you no more, you old tart. I see you fell for that pious tart's drivel. Drat! Oh, then listen, I've a request. My good friend, set me in the chamber of the Gwent Friendship Society of Beauclair. It's just round the corner.
You remember?
That's just it. I was not. But I would have dearly liked to have been. And joining them in death shouldn't bother anyone.
Certainly doesn't bother me. I'll do it. There's this chamber.
Once you enter the catacombs, go straight. The chamber will be on your right, near the corridor's mouth, and I think you.
Jen's also looking for that blend club.
What the hooking devils? Who are you? Who sent you?
So many questions, so few answers.
Hang with a clubbing philosophy. Get the swarmy cat diddler, lads.
If I had a crown for every time a bunch like this. Done. Now where you got those cards?
Leave the city through the quickest gate, then veer right. Our house is easily recognized. A tree adorns the sign above the door. I buried the chest in the garden, beneath the rose bush.
Tree on the sign, rose bush. Think I got it.
Might I ask what you did with Louis? True, he knew nothing in life that worked, but I would still prefer he not spend eternity in a ditch or prison.
Don't worry about it. Found him a nice place. Ought to feel right at home. Farewell.
Stop setting the whip away those running riot. Disperse! The exhibition of... Please disperse! The exhibition is closed!
What's this about?
Oh, you ought to give me straight. I can't bear this, please! I believe I've been clear. No presentation today. Oh, wait! Are you not that famous Witcher character trivia? I believe I have work for you.
Saw your notice. Mentioned a monument.
The matter is a delicate one, but mind you, I pay well. Alas, I can say no more at this stage. Interested?
The statue. Just tell me what's the problem.
A picture's worth 1,000 words. More, I dare say. Come with me. I'm sure. Here it is! Our pride and joy. Frederick Noble. A giant among lovers. A poking, puncturing swordsman, and atop all that, an unrivaled tickler of hearts and of minds.
So what's wrong with him?
How should I put this? It's lost its jewels.
Somebody stole the testicles off his statue.
No ordinary statue, mate. The sole monument made using the cast of the great Reginald's own genitals, certified and authenticated. sprung directly from his loins, they grant all who stroke them unparalleled ferocity. All who bear a ticket, thus, must retrieve those stones.
Got my attention. Now tell me about this Reginald, all you know.
There's so much to tell. Legend has it he and the architect Faramond planned and laid out Beauclair.
Impressed already.
In particular, Reginald took great pains to devise escape routes for lovers caught with their pants down. Literally and metaphorically. He later made frequent use of them himself. Not out of fear, mind you, but to avoid having to kill his rifles and troops.
Got any suspects?
Considering the vast potency of Reginald's prized pouch, everyone's a suspect. Who would not want it for himself?
Any idea when the theft took place?
It must have been mere hours ago. I guided the last group through the exposition quite recently. The stones were very much in place.
Need to look around. Might find a clue or two.
Do what you must, as long as you return grasping Reginald's stones. Without them, Beauclair's entire tourist sector faces trying times. Trying times. It must.
Saw marks are straight and clean. Precision castration, I call this. Dried bloodstain. Sentries to this door. Sorry to interrupt, I guess.
This is not what it seems. Word of honor. I tripped, rolled, and tumbled, and landed where she already lay.
Psst. Juice. That's not him.
I swear, this is all an unfortunate coincidence. A series thereof.
That's not my husband.
You mean not your husband? Who? And why are you in my home? Out! Now! Or I'll summon the guards!
Watch your tone, Gramps. Just here to talk.
I believe we have nothing to talk about.
Oh, we do. Just to kick things off. You're in great form for a man your age.
Well, start the day with a glass of wine. That preserves the body wonderfully.
Interesting. Might Try it. Say, ever heard of Reginald Dobry, his statue?
Everybody in the city's heard of it. Reginald's a paragon, a national hero.
Cut the bullshit, Hughes. You stole Reginald's testicles. Know that already.
I can explain everything. This...
Rosalinder! I know you're in there! You had that fancy pants of yours?
Oh no, not him too. This really is not my day.
Got you rogue! Prepare for a skeleton scallop! What the love's this? Rosalinder! One I could forgive you, but two at one time!
Wait, got nothing to do with this.
Take me for a fool? I'll teach you to fish in another man's pond!
Time for this. Go home.
Yes. That could be best. I'm done.
I don't know. It would have gone horribly for me had you not intervened. Thank you for saving my skin.
So, time to talk.
Rosalind, my dove, please allow us a moment. All right. I admit I stole the stones, and you will never believe it, but they were. Today, your son died.
Three times. Impressive.
That's more than the entire last decade.
All the same, you stole those stones and you gotta return them.
Listen, perhaps we might still get in. Let me keep the stones. I'll pay you. Grant me this, I beg you. They made me young again.
No chance. Need to take the stones, pure and simple.
But if you were to leave them with me for a day or two, 3 at the most.
Shit out of luck. Sorry.
At the day's end, it's good I had a chance to use them at all.
Thanks. And good luck. Actually think you'll do just fine without them.
Have you recovered Reginald's family jewels?
Yep, got them back.
Look at his luscious lips, it's them! It's really them! I hope this modest reward nonetheless conveys the extent of my gratitude. And look in on us tomorrow for the grand reopening. You shall stroke Reginald at no charge on the house.
Need to go around. The tree on the sign must be the house. Medallion's humming. Something's not quite right. Just like she said. And the Gwent cards, as promised.
Hey there, I'm done.
Cemetery of nice and quiet.
To sleep like a bed. The clock is getting intolerably loud. The punters bellowing and possessed. One madman especially, always shouting, all doing, all doing. But tell me, at the cemetery, what was it? Peace, as you claimed.
Nope, just a little spat.
That's it? But they hollowed like Stuart polecats. Sorry to bother you such a trifle. Here, hold it.
Thanks.